Welcome to the channel. Today I'll be upgrading my irrigation system to work with my smartphone. I'll be able to turn it off and on whenever I want and wherever I'm at. Let's get to it. I currently have an indexing valve system that's on a timer. If you're not familiar with this type of system, this is how it works. You set the pins on the timer to set when you want the sprinkler to start and stop. When the system starts, it sends power to this valve, which then opens up the water flow to the indexing valve in the ground. Every time the system starts and stops, the indexing valve in the ground changes zones. My system has 4 zones, and the problem with this current system is that if I only want to water a certain zone, say zone 4, the system will have to run zones 1, 2, and 3 before it'll run zone 4. That's a waste of water and money for me, which is why I'm changing this system. Before I started this job, I had an idea what size the existing PVC pipe under the indexing valve was from previous repairs. So I drew out how I planned on connecting the system and what items I think I would need to buy. Because I wasn't 100% sure, I bought a bunch of PVC fittings I think I was going to need to keep me from running back and forth to the store. I'll return what I don't use later. The first thing I had to do was replace this valve with a regular hand shutoff valve. The main water to the house was on the same line, so I needed to shut the water off to the house in order to replace it. There are people in the house, so to avoid having the water shut off for a long time, I put the new valve together as much as I could before cutting the water off and cutting out the old valve. I cut the water off at the meter, then made the final connections. After 15 minutes, I was able to put the valve on the off position and turn the water back on to the house. Now it's time to disconnect the wires from the old valve. I unplug the timer and this removes power from it and the valve. I open the timer and disconnect the wires. Here's what it looks like behind the timer. I'm not reusing the wires, but I will be utilizing the existing wires. I'll show you how later. Remove all the wires out the box. Remove the screws holding the box to the wall. Remove the box and disregard it. Back to the old valve outside. Disconnect the 2 wires and disregard the valve. I decided to use a shop vac to remove the dirt around the indexing valve because I knew there was way too many pipes and wires all around this area. After I exposed the pipes, I was able to see the PVC pipe size I was dealing with. Each zone will now get its own electric valve. The new valves are made for 1-inch pipe. I wasn't sure if this will work with my system because my system was running on 1 1/4 inch pipe. The rep at Cheap Sprinkler, where I purchased the valves, assured me that it would. I just had to install a PVC reducer fitting to reduce the pipe from 1 1/4 to 1 inch. No big deal. I decided to prep the new valves and the new piping as much as I could before cutting out the indexing valve out the ground and out of the way. To prep the valves, first I applied pipe thread sealant to all the screw-in fittings, then installed it on all the valves. Next, I wanted to add these PVC slip joint union fittings to the valves. These fittings allow me to replace the valves without having to cut the pipe if they ever go bad in the future. You just unscrew it and pull the valve out. To install the union joint, I need to add a pipe to the screw fitting long enough to be able to attach the union joint fitting onto it. I want the valve set up as short as possible, so I need to cut the pipe to the minimum length it can be to connect the 2 fittings together. I measured inside the screw fitting and the union joint. I cut the pipe to length. I cut 8, then set them to the side. Prime all the fittings. Before I glue the union joints on the valve, I took note the direction the water flows through the valve. There's an arrow on the valve to show you the direction the water flows through the valve. The union joints kind of have an arrow shape to them, so I glued all the union joints the same direction as the arrows on the valve. It really doesn't make a difference what direction you glue it up, but gluing it up this way lets me know right away when I look at it which way the water's flowing through the valve. Next, I dry fitted all the PVC fittings for the main water hookup. I use a multi-tool to cut out the indexing valve. I install the main water PVC setup. Then I take note that I have 2 zones on the left and 2 zones on the right. From there I start hooking up the valves, starting with the outer valves and working my way towards the center. This way I won't have pipe in the way as I'm working. As I connect the valves, I have to figure out how to connect it to the existing zones. Every situation is different. You just have to figure out how you're going to run it for your setup. Dry fit all the pieces. Make your marks on the fittings. Then you can take it apart and glue it back together exactly how it was dry fitted. Connect one zone at a time. I got all the zones connected. Here's what it looks like. Now it's time to install the cover box. For this, I need to measure how deep the box is. It's about 1 foot. Next, I'll measure how deep the hole is by putting a lever over the hole. I'm not checking for level. I just need a straight edge that's long enough to go across the hole. Now I can measure from the bottom of the hole to the edge of the level. This is too deep, so I have to add dirt to make it the height of the box. I carefully set the box on top of the pipes to see what's the best fit. One box was too small for the 4 valves. I have to use a second box. Once I figured out how to set it, I mark where I need to cut on the box, then use a jigsaw to cut it. I set it in place. Before I install the other box, I decided to run the wires from the valve to the timer inside the garage. That way I can know where on the box I will need to make a hole for the wires. To do this, remember I said I will be utilizing existing wires? I attach the new wires to the existing wires by twisting them together, then wrapping it with electrical tape. I did this on the inside of the house, then went on the outside and pulled it through the wall to the outside. These white wires are old. The single black one is the new one. It has 5 wires in it. Here's the new wires in the garage. Here's where the timer is going. The wires in this pipe, I had to remove it from the wall to be able to pull it through. Now I have to bury the wires in the ground and run it this way. Then hook up the wire in the box. This wire is low voltage, so it doesn't have to be buried deep. And because I'm not going to bury it deep, I'm going to put it in a PVC pipe to protect it. Now that I see the best way to run it, I set it to the side and put the second box in. The second box is in place. Now I'll use the shop vac to make a path for the wires. I set the wires in place. Then I put the dirt that got sucked in the vac back in the path where I got it from. Now it's time to connect all the valve wires. Each valve has 2 wires. 1 wire on each valve has to be connected to the common on the timer. So to not cross wires, I mark 1 wire on all the valves, all on the same side. I also mark the same wire at the ends. Now I can easily identify what wire I will be using as the common. I drill a hole in the boxes right across from each other, then run the wires from one box to the other. Now I hook up the new wires. I use waterproof wire nuts. I hook up all the valve common wires together. I use the white on the new wires as the common. Connect one of the color new wires to one of the remaining wires on the new valves. Mark each valve and write down the color wire you connected to that valve. For example, valve 4 is connected to the red wire. This is the timer I'm using. It's the Orbit Beehive 4-zone smart timer controller. It connects to your Wi-Fi. You have to download the app to connect it. Then you can control it from your phone. They sell it with more zones too. I just need a 4-zone. To install this, put 1 screw on the wall, hang the box, then put the other 2 screws. Here's where you connect the power supply to. Here's where you connect the color wires connected to your valves. Here's the common connection. This is what it looks like with the 5 wires connected. Remember I said write the color connected to the valve? Red was zone 4. White is common. This is the power supply. Connect the open ends to the timer 24-volt in slot. Plug it in. The timer should turn on. Turn the water valve to the on position. Read the instructions manual to see how to run the zone manually. Run all the zones to check them. You can only run one zone at a time. Run the zone, then check the valve in the box for leaks. If there's no leaks, now make sure the sprinkler on that zone is running. Wait a little bit. Looks good. Next zone. Looks good too. Do this for the last remaining zones. Once it all looks good and is working like it's supposed to, put the lid on the boxes and fill the void around the box with dirt. I put the pavers and landscaping rocks back. I would have preferred not to cover up the boxes completely, but that's my landscaping setup. It is what it is. I put the cover back on the timer. I downloaded the app on my phone. I was kind of surprised on all the function it has. I'll do another video on this some other time. For now, I just want to check to see if I can turn it off and on from my phone. Here's the home screen. Select water manually. Let's do the driveway. How long do you want to run this zone? You can change the time. I'll put it for 10 minutes for now. Hit the play button and voila, it's on. Now tap stop and it stops. Works like a champ. Here's a pro tip for you. Make a landscaping map with all the sprinkler heads and their zones, just in case you have to have someone work on your system in the future. This will save them a bunch of time. That's it for now. If you found this video helpful, do me a favor, hit that bell, like, and subscribe button for me. Until next time, peace.